Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Meredith Gershenson. I'm a research analyst here at workforce.com. And today, as the title suggests, we're going to talk a little bit about how businesses can navigate the inflation crisis. Today, I have with me Tim Zilis. He is a VP of Midwest Nordic. Tim, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Tim has built a career representing brands, products, and services in a variety of industries. In addition to his experience with customer service and health and wellness, he has had a 15-year career in financial services. Tim's work in the financial service industry allowed him to have a unique perspective on how products, financials, and marketing work together and to create the perfect balance. Joining us today also is Bo Gersnich. Bo is a business consultant here at workforce.com. Bo, as always, thank you so much for coming.
You got it.
Awesome. So to give everyone a quick run through of our platform here, we have the chat box to the right. We highly encourage questions throughout the webinar. We don't have a formal Q&A, so feel free to drop in any questions you have there, and I'll be sure to get around to them. In addition, we do have a couple poll questions for everybody. So those will just slide out right on the bottom left of your screen. Feel free to interact with those. We love hearing from you guys, getting feedback and engaging with you all. And then finally, we do have an audit for everybody at the very end. I'll pass this out. It'll just help measure your organization's preparation in the inflation crisis. And as a little incentive for filling it out, we're offering a $100 Amazon gift card. So be sure to fill that out and we'll be sure to get back to you with that. And then finally, to give a little background on workforce.com, we are a workforce management software company who specializes in scheduling and time and attendance. And really our overarching goal is just to help business leaders and frontline managers make the best decisions for their company. Cool. And then just to kick us off, Tim, I would love to hear your background and tell me about your experience and specifically the hourly wage space.
So I have a bit of a varied background. I started when I was 20 years old and purchased a Merry Maids house cleaning franchise and learned from the ground up what it took to work with teammates, work with hourly employees, work with home services, and how the client and the teammate interacted together. And of course, that's very applicable to what we're going through now with inflation and wage increases. I transferred from that career into financial services, traded at the Chicago Board of Trade, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, managed groups of traders, and different type of teammate, more professional, more type A, more hard driven, but still wanted a lot of the same benefits that even housekeepers wanted. And my current role as Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Midwest Nordic, we are a custom solution for sauna rooms and steam showers, whether commercial or residential. Ties all of that together because, again, we have in-home construction crews who are doing the work. We have a sales team that is selling the projects, and we have an operations team that manages the project from start to finish. So again, we're dealing with all sides of the business, and I think my earlier career helped train me for where I'm at now.
Definitely.
It's like your 20-year-old self knew something.
You don't know what you know until you know it, and luckily, all the mistakes I made when I was younger allows me to recognize those same mistakes now. I still do them, just like everyone else, but I recognize them faster and hopefully can fix them.
Definitely. That's great. Bo, I'd love to hear about some of the, hourly workforces that Workforce works with.
Yeah, so like you said, workforce.com, we're a time attendance and scheduling platform. So the individuals and companies that are most interested in a workforce management system will be those who are using or have a hourly labor force. Labor costs are going to be very important for these types of companies. So they're going to want tools and resources that allow them to really see that cost on as granular of a level as possible.
Right.
And you don't necessarily see that as much when you have a primarily salary driven workforce.
Definitely. That's great. Tim, I'd love to turn it back to you. So tell me about some of your experience with the current inflation crisis and just as a business founder and a VP.
I think I probably feel what most of all of your clients feel, which is a shifting sands underneath their feet. Um,
Uh,
Wages have done nothing but have gone up along with the inflation that we see around us. And coming out of the COVID pandemic, um, getting quality talent to work for us or any of businesses has been difficult. And there's been nothing more important than retaining that talent. And the best way to retain that talent, the first way to retain that talent is financial. And there is a higher wage expectation today than there was at any other point, and rightly so, because the cost of living has gone up across the board as well. So we have to stay tuned into that. We have to tune into the market. Um, we have to be willing to pay more than what we were comfortable with in the past, which means we have to have a more efficient operation and we have to be willing to pass those costs along to our customers. And that's the only way to survive right now.
Right. Right. I think that's, talking about how it all feeds into each other from the perspective of even, people going home and their cost of living simply has gone up, groceries, everything, right?
Yeah,
And even before the webinar, we were talking about commuting and even how, gas prices themselves, everything's being increased, inflated. I would love,
right.
to hear from everybody. I just sent out a poll question. Has your business been impacted by the inflation crisis? It seems like people are mostly torn between A, being yes, heavily, and B, not dramatically, but definitely notice an uptick in operation and or overhead costs. Bo, I'd love to hear, your thoughts on that.
yeah, it's interesting how there's a lot of studies that show that the increase in inflation will actually have an opposite correlation to unemployment, um, things like that. Basically, the costs that increase, and as Tim was saying, you feed that back onto your customers. Which, if you don't do that, you're losing out along that flow of additional costs. But when you do that, everyone else's standard of living, the cost increase, and they may have to send a partner into the workforce, or they may have to get a second job, or there's costs that you now have to account for that you didn't have to previously when the inflation was low. So actually, that gets potentially a little bit easier to hire in times of increasing inflation.
Well, I think, Bo, to tack onto that, I think what we are starting to see recently, and I mean within the past week or two, are we're hearing more tech layoffs. And that's going
Yeah.
to filter throughout the entire workforce, which means there will be more talent available for recruiting than there was just a couple of months ago. So there is going to be a shift. And in our case, for home construction and home remodeling and home improvement, at some point we're going to start seeing home prices level off, the demand for homes to decrease as interest rates go up. That cost of maintaining a home is higher, which means there'll be less construction, which
Right.
for us hopefully will increase the talent pool that we can choose from to do the projects that we work on. So
Mm.
our industry is probably similar to a lot. Um, we're a little unique that we feel the inflation in the projects that we build. We use a very unique type of wood, grade A cedar, which is traditional for sauna construction, but it's a very expensive wood and it's very sensitive to price increases. So we've got the materials that we use going up in price. We've got the labor force that we have that has an expectation to be paid more. And up until recently, we had a client who would pay almost anything for that service. I
Right.
think that will start to change going forward as that demand starts to slow down because of the interest rate increase. And I hate to use the R word, but the potential for a recession. If we go into a recessionary environment, that will change the dynamic completely. And we'll see that, that hasn't, I think we're on the edge of it. Doesn't mean we have to be in a full blown recession. We certainly can go into a mild one and cool down the economy in general.
And we'll definitely touch on that possibility of an R word coming about. later on. But I wanted to kind of go back and talk a little bit about, how your past experience has helped you navigate the current economy, that being on the trade floor.
Well, when I was on the trading floor, that was during the '08, '09 crisis,
Mm-hmm.
recession, um, housing bubble, deflation, and prior to that was 2000, and I had the house cleaning business during 2000. And 2000 was a very similar environment to today. Um, Astronomic prices for tech stocks. People would have paid anything for tech stocks. Housing was very difficult to purchase. There weren't many homes for sale. There seemed to always be a mad scramble when you wanted to purchase a home. So, very similar environments to what we have today. And boy, what did you learn from the past? Again, you remember the scars, so I am aware of all of the bad things that can happen, and hopefully I can pivot in front of them. Again, one of the key things that we did in the house cleaning company that we applied to sauna construction is we want to be overemployed. We want to have more teammates on staff than frankly we need at any given time. And I consider that a cost of doing business. And what that allows us to do, it allows us to be more flexible with the time of our entire crew.
Mm-hmm.
If people need time off, we have the extra teammate to fill in. It also allows us to be more flexible for the customer. We want to be more service oriented and work at their convenience. So having that extra staff gives us much more flexibility on both sides of the equation. Difficult in the recent past to be overstaffed because it was hard to get fully staffed to begin with. I think now and going forward, we're going to have that luxury. And I consider it a cost of doing business. And we pass that cost along to our clients. But if we do a good enough job, as with all of the service businesses, the client will pay what is necessary to do a great job.
I would love to point to this first slide that we have, from a Forbes article, talking a little bit about obviously the kind of comparing and contrasting the '08 and the current possibility of a 2022 recession. And I really want to point to this first quote, and it's kind of emphasizing what you're talking a little bit about, Tim, on how there's a lot of interesting correlation between 2000 when you had the cleaning business and now, and you're seeing a lot of similarities there. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on these quotes and just kind of hear what you have to say about them.
Well, as I look at them, I think they kind of reinforce what I feel in my everyday management of the company. It's interesting to see an economist who's looking at a global scale speak to things that apply to my business or apply to me or to the other people in the industry. And we do see an overinflated stock market. We see, and perhaps not, the similarity in tech of 2000 is more similar to crypto and NFT today. Things that are very high priced, very much in demand, people willing to pay any amount to be involved in. And as the government wants to deflate that and to try to control the inflation, they increase interest rates, they increase costs, it slows down housing, it makes less money available to be invested, and it makes people hold on to their money more because they're fearful for inflation. And very similar circumstances. And as with all changes, we'll all get through it. We'll all survive it.
Right.
We'll all make the adjustments that we need to. And part of that's going to mean creating efficiencies. And, it's one way that workforce really comes into play is how do you create efficiencies with your labor force to keep your costs down that don't directly impact their salary. And one way of doing that is how do we manage our people better? How do we manage them more efficiently? How do we save money on the operations side in the management of the teammates that we have on staff? And that goes to this changing environment of inflation, of high housing demand, of difficult employment opportunities. So I think it applies across all of that.
Definitely. Bo, I'd love to kind of hear, you piggyback off of Tim's comments there, specifically, pertaining on how every small detail can really just help lower those labor costs in any possible way.
Yeah, as Tim shared that, I kind of thought a lot about auto scheduling. and how a lot of customers, clients that we work with are really focused in on scheduling, against a ratio of some sort that, can show them exactly where they need labor costs allocated to, a 15-minute increment. So that way, rather than, scheduling via a pattern or having regular hours, you do have that larger amount of workforce, as Tim's talking about, but you have them working at the most finite moments where you can, capitalize on their labor the best.
Right.
And then on those, time frames in which you predict that you won't have as much business, you can save in that cost proactively by not even having them scheduled to begin with.
Yep. On the hourly wage front, as Bo speaks to, you tend to have a much more flexibility in your hours, and we may find 8 to noon is a busy time for us, or Mondays and Tuesdays at the beginning of the week are a busy time for us. And being able to have flexibility in scheduling and controlling the scheduling of your hourly employees, boy, it just makes you a much more efficient company because everyone's working at their optimal time and at their optimal performance. And the scheduling aspect of that in technology is a huge benefit.
I want to talk a little bit about the different types of work, maybe even outside of hourly work. So Tim, so the difference between staff and housekeeping to the builders, you have working for you now, so versus trade work and hourly workforce. What can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, the needs and demands of our teammates in the house cleaning are similar and different, and and I can contrast that a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The needs for them, the most important thing was flexibility of time so that they can take care of their family. We tended to hire a lot of moms who liked the role because we could fit their schedule. They may only be able to work from 10 to 2 every day. They need to get Johnny off to school and they need to pick Johnny off at the bus after school. So we would be able to fit that schedule for them, and that was a great benefit for them. Our construction crews, although the schedule matters, what's most important for them is making sure that they're always busy. They know that they can always have a construction role. So our job is to make sure that their entire schedule is filled. If we give them Thursdays off, that they're not going to be happy with that. They want to fill a 40-hour work week plus to fill their schedule. Whereas on the house cleaning side, they were happy with minimal hours and being much more flexible. But again, I think the primary driver that brought people in the door was salary. That was always the primary driver. And then past that, it's can you give them the things that they need? And generally, that would fall to flexibility. So the house cleaning needed much more flexible hours. The construction crews want more guaranteed hours.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I would love to turn a little bit more towards just general operations during inflation. So, what changes, Tim, have you made to your sales and manufacturing team nowadays?
The biggest change that we've made on a human resource side is we've reached outside of our bubble, and historically we would hire very local.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've done recently is we've reached across the ocean all the way to the Philippines to find our latest teammate. And she's been a godsend, and she's been super helpful, been great in the operation side. And it's a way for us to use remote help at a lower price point, a lower cost for onboarding that teammate and having her and staffing. So for us, we've looked outside of our traditional bubble. Now that's created other issues of how do you manage that person who's going to be remote all of the time.
Right.
And we're learning on the fly of what that takes. Certainly more contact, more video contact makes a big difference. I can tell you in a recent role that I had where I was managing a bigger group of sales staff, when we were on premise, when we were on site together, I would see them face to face less, even though they were 10 feet away from me. I would be in my office working all day, and outside of scheduled one-on-ones, we wouldn't see each other much. Whereas with remote work, with video work, I tend to check in multiple times a day. Because I can't see someone on site, I want to check in with them to make sure they have all that they need to be as functional and as efficient as possible.
Right.
So I would say for everybody, if we start looking outside of our role as remote work becomes much more common, it opens up the pool of talent that we can look for.
I think one of the main overarching themes here seems to be meeting your staff kind of where they're at to increase that retention and increase that engagement. And with a lot of these hourly workforces, it's a little hard to, go remote, obviously, especially in the healthcare industry, especially in the manufacturing industry, right? It's nearly impossible. Bo, I'd love to hear, your thoughts on maintaining that visibility for hourly staff that, can't necessarily go remote.
Yeah, I like that. I would still use the exact same example where, so say they can't go remote, you manage a franchise or multiple franchises, you may still not be able to see them. You may not necessarily be in there at all times either. You may be at a different, store at a given day and not know what's going on. I think the need then is, to Tim's point, to put things online, but also integrate online into our day-to-day operations. So if you are on the fly or they are on the fly, having a good understanding of who's clocked in where, of what our current demand is in a given time to see, do I need to make adjustments on the fly? I don't necessarily have to be in the store to know what's going on, kind of thing. So.
Right. I want to point quickly to this poll question that says, what sort of operational changes has your business made to mitigate costs? And we have a couple of responses here. One of them that really sticks out to me and actually relates really well with this slide here. Somebody said product changes that require less prep, in parentheses restaurant, and more automated training and resources. And as you can see on the slide, the first top left point is menu costs. So kind of changing and slimming down the products and services that you might offer just to kind of balance out that inflation, those inflated wages that you're seeing everywhere else. Tim, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, if any of these points resonate with Midwest Nordic or any business that you've been a part of.
Well, I look at the first box, menu costs. Although we're not a restaurant, we do offer a menu of options to our clients on a sauna installation. And one thing that we've done is we've tried to pare down the amount of options that we're offering. And we're doing that for efficiency of installation. We don't have to train a new person on how to install a new type of light. So we're sticking more with our standard installation. We're trying to streamline what we're doing, and we're trying to increase costs where we can. Where can we add value and charge for it without increasing our overhead to do it? So although we're not a restaurant, in some ways, there's similarities in what we're offering to our clients. The next box being wage pressure, we all feel that. Wages, and I am no different than I've been on both sides of the ball. I want to be paid for my talent, and I want to be paid up to the level of the people around me. So when I work with our teammates, I'm empathetic. I'm empathetic to their feeling of, listen, the whole world is costing me more, and all of my peers are being paid more. I want to be paid what's in line. And so we do have to be aware of that, and we want to maintain that, because the last thing we want to do is lose a great teammate over wages. If it comes down to that, then we're doing something wrong. So we want to make sure that they're compensated appropriately, and that we're finding other ways to add benefits so that they enjoy their day and they're most efficient. The next box being less competitive. It's an issue for everybody. For our competitors, the person who can get materials at the lowest price will win the quote. And so do you buy right? Can you buy in bulk when the price is right? Can you store it? And then can you deliver it to the client in the most efficient way? And if you can do those things, which we try to do every day, we'll be able to quote those projects lower than our competition. And that's where the demand comes in. And it's a commodity. It's a commodity issue.
Right.
And so we want to be cognizant of our commodity prices and how we pass those along to the client.
Yeah, it seems this whole graph, right? It's great in dissecting kind of the ins and outs, but it really puts a lot of emphasis on the monetary and the financial aspect of each business, which I think is great. But I think what we're missing out are more of the loopholes. And I think that resides a lot within the scheduling aspect. So, Tim, I'd love to hear kind of about what changes you've made in terms of your scheduling, such as flexible hours that you're now offering.
And that's probably the most primarily the biggest thing we've done is we've made our time much more flexible for the sales staff, which
Right.
we can do. We know when our busy times are. We know that the beginning of the week is our most busiest time of the week. We know that mornings are busier than afternoons. So we're trying to schedule around that and give our teammates the opportunity to fit their schedule around when it suits us the best.
Mm.
Our installation crews, we just don't have that luxury. They need to be on site when the job calls for it. And the operations team is somewhere in between. The operations team is the backbone of the company. And without them, the projects don't get completed. So they have to be there when the demand is there for the projects as well. So I think, again, we're flexibility in scheduling, efficiency in scheduling, which is my responsibility. We have to schedule everyone the most efficient way possible for them to be the most productive. And that helps keep our costs down. Productivity is key.
Definitely. That's great. Bo, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, on kind of coming from a different perspective opposed to just lowering the menu costs or lowering, or increasing wages, and more talking about from that scheduling perspective and how people can save money through that way.
Yeah, I think to my earlier point, one of the benefits of being very cognizant of when and how and who you're scheduling is going to be your ability to understand your overtime costs. The costs of wage pressure is something that, although it adds the bottom line, but it's ultimately fair. The reason that you retain those employees is because you're being fair according to their value against the market. But a cost that you can avoid with good scheduling practice will be that overtime costs. That's going to be, 1.5 times the cost of the wage increase. And so you're taking the increase of cost that, is kind of an accepted fact, and then you're, increasing by 50%. So if you can control the overtime costs in the same way with that scheduling, then, I think that you could benefit a lot and even account for some of the increase in wage pressure.
Definitely. That's great. I would love, Tim, to kind of talk a little bit about just how your own day-to-day operations have changed as VP of Midwest Nordic.
Well, we've definitely had to get more comfortable with remote work. And that is probably the greatest change since COVID. It forced remote work on us, and it's forced us to learn how to manage teammates differently than if we're on site together.
Right.
So that being said, it allows more flexibility for the teammate. They can take care of personal needs during the day and clock out, and then clock back in when they're most needed on the sales floor. So flexibility is key. Remote management is key. Those are all of the things that have been thrust upon us with the pandemic. And, frankly, I like it. I think it's been a positive overall for the company. We have found that we can operate on the sales side just as efficiently remotely as we did in person. Maybe more so. There's less. When you work from home, more often than not, there's less outside interruptions than when you're in the office. When you're in the office, you tend to talk to and touch most everyone that's in your department. When you're at home, you're much more isolated and much more focused on the task at hand, which on the sales side is managing incoming calls and managing customer service. So remote work has probably helped with that. and has taught us to be better managers remotely, and being able to track time and track results, having key metrics in place has been very important. Because how else do you know Susie, our imaginary Susie, how do you know how efficient they are at home if you don't have a metric, if you don't have a baseline of what your expectation should be for us and for the teammate? If it's 50 sales calls a day tends to be our metric, then if you're only doing 18 a day, we're going to have a conversation about that.
Right.
And I would say conversely, if you're doing 60 calls a day, I'm going to have a conversation about that, because I don't want to overwork anyone either. One thing we didn't touch on is part of the enjoyment that the teammates have is not being overworked. Overtime is a negative to the company in cost, as Bo spoke to. In most cases, it's a negative to that teammate in burnout and in time. One of the downsides to remote work is that people tend to have longer days. You clock on when you get up in the morning, and you don't clock off until you sit down for dinner at night, because of the convenience of having your workstation so close at hand. And we have to try to limit that. We have to try to make sure people aren't burned out by overburdening them with work and overburdening them with calls. So we want to be careful. There's a certain number of calls that they can be their best at, and we want to hit that number. If it's more than that, they can't be the best for the client. And the best for the client is what drives our company. If they feel we're giving them superior service, they will accept the higher price that we want to charge.
Right.
In turn, allow us to take care of our teammates better. So it's that never-ending cycle. And it goes the other way as well. If we can't charge enough to the client, if we do cut back on service, then we do have to cut back on wages. Unhappy teammates, unhappy client, unhappy Tim, no one's happy. And we want to avoid that.
We don't want that.
We don't want that. We want to escalate up instead of down, when possible.
Right. I think you touched on a really interesting point. You talked a little bit about KPIs and metrics, and we had a webinar last week on what a 4-day work week means for hourly workforce. And I think, there was a really interesting part that our guest had, where she talked a lot about the importance of maintaining those metrics and making sure that you have that data in your back pocket, which I think is crucial, especially nowadays where, there's a lot of hybrid work, there's a lot of remote work going on. But I would love to turn more towards those on-site employees that you still have. How are you increasing those comfort levels for them?
Well, we are a small company and don't quite have the luxury to do the things that we'd like to do or that we see being done in the industry. And what we can do at a minimum is have as good of technology as is possible. When you're on the phone all day, your headset and microphone is attached to your body at all times. We want the clearest sound, the most comfortable headset, and we want the client to be able to hear the best on those calls. So we want to make sure that the computer is as powerful as possible. Our technology managers put us into the Apple universe. For me, that's kind of new, but for most people, it's a better experience in using that tool and using that technology. Having the right chair. We'll spend any amount of money for a comfortable chair because you're going to be in that chair all day. If you want a stand-up desk, we'll invest in the stand-up desk. So for us, it's been more of a commitment to spending money on the hardware that our teammates are using, on-site and off-site. We want to maintain the quality of equipment, even if they're remote, as they have on-site. And then I suppose you just look to do the little perks. Can you have lunch brought in once a week? Some companies are fortunate that they can bring in multiple meals, multiple days a week.
Right.
And that makes life easy for everyone. Can you offer extra services? Can you bring in perhaps a massage specialist to do desk massages during the day? Nice little treat like that.
That sounds great.
Right? That sounds great.
Yeah.
And from what I hear, the bigger companies are able to offer services like laundry and dry cleaning, and a lot of the things that you need to operate day to day, they can bring either on campus or they can set up delivery on campus for them.
Right.
Us being a company, we don't quite have those needs or the ability to provide that, but I think it sounds great. I'd love it.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of at desk massage. That sounds pretty great. I asked a poll question, one of the last ones here, and it seems, there's some results still coming in, but it seems split pretty much 50-50. I asked, has your business offered any increased perks, benefits for your employees? And some are saying, yes, we've offered more wages, more PTO, bonuses, et cetera. And others are saying no. And I think it's a really hard balance in today's stage when we're talking about inflated prices. The last thing people want to do is put more money, in their business just to keep maybe one or two employees on. Bo and Tim, I guess, Bo, we'll start with you. What is your thoughts on that and making sure that, you're still balancing out those bonuses and, you're still trying to increase those comfort levels at the same time?
Yeah, I would circle back to what Tim had been talking about earlier with how his different roles at his company wanted different things out of their schedules. I think that's going to be pretty standard with any type of group of people. You should be cognizant of the money you throw at problems and make
Right.
sure that it aligns with the expectations or the desires of the employees that you're looking to, invest in. So both Meredith and I got really excited about the massages and the chairs.
Yeah.
And so if our, the owners of workforce.com are listening to this webinar, I think
Well, I'm
that a
sending them
great
the
investment,
recording immediately after.
you can tell right away that, that's exactly what we're looking for. But that may not be the case for other companies. And so I think being aware of, your employees and what they like, what they're looking for out of added incentives and perks, matters a lot.
And listen, everyone wants to be recognized for the effort and the value that they bring to any organization. So it's
Definitely.
imperative for management and HR to be aware of that, to cast praise where it's deserved, and the simplest way to do that is you offer bonus, you offer a perk to the people who are deserving. And as management, we have to find out the ones that aren't deserving. How do we make them more efficient? How do we make them more accountable? And if they aren't a fit for the role, how do we either find another role for them or help them transition to another company that has what they need? And so I think that's a constant battle that in HR and in management, we always have to be doing. You want your best. I want my best teammates, and I want to overpay them. And then I want to charge as much as necessary to maintain that platinum group of people. That's what we all strive for. And it's a constant battle of continuing that. And so I would hope that little perk of back massages at your desk, if that's where you're doing your work and that's where you're providing your efficiencies for workforce, then whatever makes you more comfortable and makes you better at what you are doing, I would want to provide that to you.
Right.
Whatever those perks are, and they're going to be unique for every company.
Definitely. I would love to talk a little bit about combating inflation, if that's even possible. Tim, is there any surefire way to combat inflation just as a small business, or is all you can do really at the end of the day just write it out?
I think you manage it as best as you can.
Mm-hmm.
You find the efficiencies where possible. If you have the opportunity to buy your materials at a cheaper price, you do that. If you have the opportunity to be more efficient, you do that. You find small ways to offset the price increase. The problem that we tend to have, what most companies have, is we're going to be behind the inflation. All of our costs are rising, and I'm going to have quotes in the pipeline that didn't take into account the inflation that we're experiencing. So I know I have jobs that are already sold that we're committed to, that we're not going to make the same margin that we expected because all of our wood materials have gone up in price. Because we're having to pay all of our installation crews more, we didn't take that into account.
Right.
So we kind of have to look ahead and see if we can see what effects inflation are going to have in the future. What are the lumber markets looking like? What are the employment markets looking like? How are wages going to go up in between our projects? But then otherwise, unfortunately, as you say, you ride it out.
Right.
Reduce costs, find efficiencies, be profitable, and wait for better times. I mean, that's what this can get more complicated. If we have an inflationary environment and a recession at the same time, now we're going to get complicated, because I would say the same things. Hey, Tim, we don't have inflation, but we're into a recession. I'm going
Mhm.
to say a lot of the same things about how are we going to manage our business to be more efficient and profitable through a recession. Well, if you tack on inflation of wages and commodity goods along with a reduction in growth opportunities, it's going to get tricky fast.
Right.
And the strong will survive, the nimble will survive, um, and we, like most businesses, we want to be both of those things. We want to be strong, we want to be nimble, and we want to look ahead and plan and hopefully avoid the potholes that are going to be out there in front of us.
Definitely. And you put it perfectly, finding those efficiencies, finding those small ways that in the end add up astronomically is huge. And whether that's through scheduling, whether that's through maybe narrowing down your menu a little bit or your list of products and services, it all adds up in the end for sure.
Right? We look at reducing waste on the wood that we use to build the saunas. If we can be more precise in
Oh,
quoting the dimensions of a sauna, for example, we can save that extra material that otherwise might get cut off and thrown in the garbage. And
right.
that might just be a few percentage points of cost savings. But when you add that up over enough projects, it becomes significant. And that might be the difference at the end of the year of being profitable and not being profitable. Just those little things that you can do. At the house cleaning company, it was buying the cleaning products. We
Mhm.
were always on the search for the best cleaning products, because that means that they're going to work the most efficiently in the home, and then B, the lowest cost per ounce uh, of cleaning products, because that would reduce our overhead materials that we need. So that was a constant thing that we strived for. When business was good, there was low inflation, and the
Right.
economy was strong. We all tend to forget about those things. Things are coming to us now that are reminding us to be nimble and be efficient. And
Right.
now's the time for that.
And there's a million things that you can do and you should and shouldn't do, but at the end of the day, it all definitely adds up. And I love the idea of even using things like waste and minimizing it as much as possible. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that people in the audience can take some ideas from you and apply it to their own business, whether it's in the healthcare industry, hospitality, restaurant, whatever it is. So that's great. That's awesome. Bo, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, not too much. I did enjoy what Tim was talking about regarding maintaining your inventory. I think that if you can lock in your costs during your sales cycle, then it helps maintain those margins a little bit better than if you are kind of operating on quotes on your own quotes. Definitely impacts things from a correlating that to like staffing or labor oriented services. Again, I think it comes down to the overtime. You can predict people's hourly rates, you can predict the increase of rates, but the overtime, the excessive working, the costs associated with turnover in that's things that you should definitely be cognizant of.
Yeah,
Almost like
definitely.
maintaining your own inventory in your own way.
For sure. For sure. Tim, to help close this out here, what are one or two top actions, tips, or takeaways that you can share with the audience to help combat inflation?
Well, I think number one is buying right, buying in bulk, having the ability to store your materials if you can purchase them at a good price. I think that's paramount. And on the employment side, the labor side, um, the best thing we've done lately is we've looked abroad for staffing where possible, and that was driven by one, a lack of teammates that were available to us. The talent pool just wasn't available to us because unemployment is so low currently, and the other was cost of wages. We were getting priced out of the ability to staff some roles that we wanted to, and so looking overseas saved us money on the labor side, on the cost, and brought us a wider pool of talent for us to choose from. So, controlling your commodity costs and expanding your pool of talent are probably the two best things that we've done lately.
That's great. Bo, I'd love to turn the question on to you. What are 1 or 2 top tips, actions, or takeaways you can share with the audience to help combat inflation as best as possible?
Yeah, definitely control and understand your costs as best as possible, and know when those costs have to be allocated out onto your customers, and control your overtime, because that is one of the components of inflation that you do have access to help mitigate.
Awesome. Well, that's great. I have inflation audit that I just shared with everybody, should pop up right on the bottom left of your screen. Feel free to fill that out. It'll just help gauge, again, how prepared your organization is for the inflation crisis. And again, we are offering a $100 Amazon gift card if you fill that out for a lucky winner. So be sure to check out those inboxes, and we'll be sure to get back to you with those results. And Tim and Bo, thank you both so much for coming on. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. And we'll have to have you back for a part 2.
I'd love it. You're super welcome, and I enjoyed myself.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it, and we will see you all at the next one.
Awesome.
Bye,
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.